As Suk mentioned, particularly on an important topic for all Canadians in immigration that has been one of the top topics discussed in this country over the last few months, over the last year, the course of the year where I have been the minister. It's just under a year that I became the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Before that, I was the Minister of Indigenous Affairs in two portfolios for 4 years. Canada isn't immune to a lot of the discussion, some criticism around immigration to countries that are highly sought after around the world. Canada is the top destination for many countries where people are looking to build a life, sometimes to seek refuge, but also to contribute to who we are as Canadians and to build the still a young country that is Canada. What Canadians have been telling us, regardless of the length of time that they've been here over the last, as we have looked and done strategic reviews of our departments, as my provincial counterparts have done the same, is that there still is a positive view of immigration in Canada, but it isn't one that isn't without scrutiny. People want an immigration system that makes sense, that is rigorous, that people can say to themselves, this makes sense for the economy, this makes sense for the public policies that we have, whether it is to promote French in communities outside Quebec, inside Quebec, whether it is to fulfill particular economic goals and fill labor gaps, whether it is to make sure that a number of newer Canadians that are looking to have their families reunified get that opportunity. And these aren't opportunities that go without boundaries. They are ones that we have to look at in the context of levels that we set every year for permanent residency and citizenship that are at relatively historic highs. It's no secret to anyone that has been studying the issue, and I suspect around this room, that we have an affordability challenge in this country, starting with interest rates that have been at levels that we haven't seen in decades. We have had much criticism around perhaps the volume of people that are here temporarily. We are at historic highs when it comes to temporary residents for a variety of reasons. As a comparator to the population, now close to 7% of the population in Canada, according to Statistics Canada, are people that follow under the category of temporary residents. So they are not permanent, they're not Canadian citizens, and that has come with issues in and around how that impacts housing, how that impacts affordabilities, the provision of services, healthcare services, infrastructure needs, and those are all ones that we need to tackle in a reasonable way as politicians. Otherwise, we fall into too quickly discussions that are unreasonable, and we see that in different countries that have faced this challenge. We also have a historic number of people that are fleeing violence, whether it's in particular Ukraine, 300,000 Ukrainians that are here fleeing a nuclear aggressor in Russia. We are a country that has said quite clearly we will support those people. We have a historic amount of international students, and particularly to here in Surrey, half of the designated learning institutions that welcome those people are situated here in Surrey. And that has come with numbers that are well beyond those that we have seen in the past. That is limited to, that analysis is generally limited, not exclusively, but to two provinces, British Columbia and Ontario, where we have seen large numbers of temporary residents in the category of students and the postgraduate work permits that come with them that have been quite high in the last while. We need to get that under control, and there is a lot of blame to go around. There's a lot of credit to go around to the institutions that have been responsible, but this is about a system that has gotten a bit hot and that we need to, as a government, take a look at and say, how do we bring that back to what the original intent of a visa program was, to make sure that we are attracting the best and brightest, that if they stay in the country, there are jobs for them, and that their money isn't just taken from them by unscrupulous actors that are just looking to make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and not care about these young minds that in some cases their whole families have put their hopes and dreams into. So these are challenges that Canadians are looking for us to solve in a reasonable, rational way. And that comes with some important discussions, debates, perhaps disagreements with provinces and the institutions that welcome them as to how we do that. I'm not a person that is judge, jury, and executioner. I have ideas, I have a role, I have a responsibility, but I am not the ultimate decider in these things. It comes with proper discussions with economic actors, with institutions themselves, and those that want to welcome people on a temporary basis, with perhaps a discussion about how they become permanent and how they become Canadian citizens, or have to take a decision whether to go home and take their talents to another country. So these are all issues that fall into a greater category of affordability. And when we talk about immigration, we have to remember that there has been incredible good that has come to Canada through immigration. A number of you around the table are proof of that. But it doesn't come without a discussion about how we make sure that we can stand up to Canadians and say, is this the way we go as a country? Is this how we contribute to the economy? And how do we do this in a way that is responsible in the context, particularly the geopolitical context that we face with our main economic partner to the south that has a particular view on these things, and an integrated economy that does not necessarily operate independently. I didn't plan a long opening speech to tell you what to ask me. I'm really here to answer your questions in an open fashion, and I won't take much more time, but I do want to again thank you, as I did in the opening, for the work that you do and the important role that you play in our democracy that is important now more than ever. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sukji, for inviting me here today to speak to your local media and international media.
Thank you, Brother Marc. And what we'll do now, we'll go to the questions. We'll take the question related to the immigration file first, and if we have time, then we can focus on other topics. There will be one question and one follow-up. And we'll start with Mr. Pijada, then Amninder.
Thanks, Honorable Marc Miller, of your visit and Justice of Galibar. My question about does the federal government plan to introduce new business immigration program directly, given the recent reduction of application under the self-employed and startup program? And related with this one, the people who employ, they have the employer agreement, but unfortunately the employer are harassing the vulnerable people who have the work permit. So I know there is a law over there for the harassment, but the people are too much worried who have the vulnerable work permit.
Thank you. Minister.
So a couple of things that we've seen, and you pointed out to the abuse of the system that has existed. In any program that we have, there is always the opportunity for bad actors to abuse it. The business program was never intended to be a backdoor entry into Canada or an opportunity simply to come here and get Canadian citizenship. Is an opportunity to come here and invest and get the best and brightest. When it comes to startups, we know that some startups fail. That's the nature of startups. But what we did see with the program was a need to make sure that we were limiting the number per organization that could benefit from it because of the distortions that were occurring and certain actors taking too much space with some of the startup visas. So we have changed that in a positive way to limit the number of ultimate visas that an organization can sponsor, but the aggregate number will either stay the same or even increase of visas, but spread over more organizations. So that's one opportunity that was done in a spirit of reforming the program. When it comes to vulnerable employees, that is something I am looking at quite intensely, because we know that there are a number of people that are being exploited. There is an opportunity under certain circumstances to have open work permits when people have closed work permits so that they can move on to a different employer. Obviously, the solution at the end of the day isn't to liberate someone simply because their employer was abusive. You want to get rid of the abuse. You're only kind of dealing with part of the problem if you say, okay, go work somewhere else. Well, that employer still is there, and they're still being abusive. There's responsibility both federally and provincially, whether it's in ESDC or whether it's with the province, to make sure that proper business practices are being employed, as if that person was a Canadian citizen.
Thank you. Mr. Amninder Singh.
Thank you, Sukh. Thank you,
And
Mr.
then to Mr. Ampua.
Thank you, Sukh, and thank you, Mr. Minister. I have a question, a very specific question about immigration, and this relates to criminals from other countries coming and settling in Canada, and more specifically criminals from India, gangsters from India, and specifically from the state of Punjab and Haryana, who seem to have a lot of influence in Canada, in British Columbia, and some of them have moved in here. Some very serious, dangerous, wanted criminals are here, not as refugees. They're just hanging out here. When heat gets too much for them in Punjab or Haryana or India, they're in Surrey. And I'm just wondering, sometimes I read, like 2 years ago, there's a most wanted criminal from Punjab. He was found dead here. He just died of natural causes. But how did he happen to come here? Do you, as a minister, are you concerned that criminals come here and they have transnational gangs from Punjab and Haryana, and they order their gang members here to extort business people? And some of the leaders are here in Canada, not only BC but in Ontario as well, and they order assassinations and hits on their rivals in India. How do these people come here under your watch?
So look, it would be naive to state that Canada is a hermetically closed country and that we catch absolutely everyone in the screenings that we undertake. I will not at the same time speak about ongoing investigations and national security investigations in a public fashion. It would be irresponsible to do so. When someone applies for a visa, they are subject to screening, and it's a progressive level of questioning that an officer undertakes in order to accord someone a visa, depending on the one that they apply for. When we do biometrics, that is fingerprints and other checks, we check with international partners, but we obviously cannot catch everyone. If someone lies to get into the country, they can obviously be deported once they're caught, but there are times where people do get into the country and they commit crimes. Whether they were criminalized in the source country or criminalized in Canada is often something that we have to look at quite carefully. There are people that come here and they did not have a criminal record and then they commit crimes here. That's a separate thing than what you were suggesting, which is that international criminals, as part of a consortium, come in here in an organized fashion and commit crimes. That is something that well-determined actors, regardless of the country, and particularly sophisticated gangs, are often able to get around even the most stringent immigration requirements. And Canada has some of the most robust requirements in the world when we are checking people, but it's not perfect. There was recently a discussion about the importance of getting police certificates as part of the visa process. Well, we all know how unreliable at times, depending on the country, the police certificates can be. And if we were to rely on a country that is sometimes not the most, well, I would say, a reluctant partner, those certificates often become quite questionable as to their reliability. So there's a multifaceted way that we employ and that our enforcement agencies employ to track people. But regrettably, at times people do get in and they do commit crimes. So well-determined actors do have an ability, despite best efforts, to get in. That's just the reality of it. It happens with the US as well. But anytime we see that, we have to get smart and adjust on the fly. And when we catch people, they either get deported or they serve their sentence here and then get deported. Again, it's ongoing. This is work that we do in conjunction with local authorities, with the Minister of Public Safety, Public Security, Dominic LeBlanc, to make sure that your Canadians are safe. Regardless of my cabinet role, and regardless of any cabinet minister's role, our number one job is to keep Canadians and people that are living on this territory safe, and that goes with addressing criminality, whether it is homegrown or domestic, or whether it comes from abroad.
Thank you. Before the media, just a minute, hold on, Amira. It's better to go one question each and then come back. If the fellows, you can mention your name and the media outlet for records, then it will be good as well. So now I have 3 persons on the list right now. We'll go to Mr. Amarpal Singh, and then Mr. C.J. Sidhu, and Mr. Harjinder Thind. Mr. Singh.
Hi, my name is Amarpal from Canadian New York Times. I have a question. In next 1 year, in 24-25, how many immigrants you will take in Canada, and will from the domestic, because many people here from work permit and international student, and what's your plan now?
So the easy answer is over the next 485,000 permanent residents, next year's 500,000 permanent residents, stabilizing to 500,000 permanent residents from the permanent draw. Now, your question is very important because people tend to assume that the people that are available, that's 500,000 that come from abroad, and then there's nothing that, and another amount that comes domestically. That isn't the case. We do domestic draws quite consistently, and given the pressures that I outlined in my introduction, I've told my teams, I've told provinces that have a responsibility for about 100,000 of those draws to start focusing on the labor needs that they have with people that are here already in the country, as opposed to going abroad and saying, let's bring in new people. We need to focus on people that are here temporarily and make sure that we are leveraging the skills that the people have in order to integrate them into the market. They're already integrated because they've been in Canada. Presumably the pressure on housing is already baked in. So what I've asked is whether it's the federal portion of the draws or the provincial responsibility for the draws, which together is quite significant. It's several 100,000 people that become permanent residency outside the humanitarian aspects and outside the family reunification aspects of the permanent residency draws, so that we are also addressing what you said, people that with expiring postgraduate work permits that have the points necessary to become permanent residents. Now, I'll also say this, it isn't for everyone. There are many people on postgraduate work permits that will have to make a difficult decision as to whether they choose to apply for permanent residency or whether they have to go home. People that were given postgraduate work permits were never guaranteed automatic permanent residency, despite some promises that may have been made by unsavory actors. But at that same time, we are doing our utmost to look at how we can leverage the fact that we have a pool of talented people here, and we can do more domestic draws of people in the country. So that's sort of where the state of things is today for the permanent levels. I have asked my provincial counterparts to look at the measures by which we reduce the temporary residents over the next few years from 7% to 5%. That includes taking a look at the number of international students that we welcome, as well as the postgraduate work permits that are awarded as part of that program. So there will be some adjustment and some turbulence over the next 2 or 3 years. Obviously, starting this year with the decisions that we took in and around the international student program, but also other decisions when it comes to how LMIAs are granted, how the exceptions that we have given to some of the workforces to have 3 out of 10 of their workers to be from abroad, back down to 2 out of 10. Those may be decisions that we have to be a little more stringent on. But again, my worry again is the workforce, which is contracting, and there have been contractions. The labor availability is much less than it was before. So those are adjustments that we will have to make, and the immigration system will have to adjust accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. C.J. Sidhu.
Welcome to Surrey, Minister Miller. And, my question alluding to same you already mentioned about the international students. So international students came here, finished their degrees, they are on an open work permit. And what's happening now is that whatever the point system is gone too high. So they already part of the economy, they contributed, and they are, how they came to this country was not an easy part for them coming here, spending a lot of money, took a loan or sell their land. They are here now. Now the challenge is people, Minister, who already here, can we make it a little easier for them to becoming immigrants before we look outside?
And I think the answer, CJ, to that is yes. The reason some of the point system draws have been quite high is because people are hitting those levels. I have a duty to look at that point system and how it's awarded to make sure that we are properly orienting it towards the workforce needs that are there. And that's an ongoing challenge. Obviously, people that are in that position want some level of predictability, but the market does move as well. So the idea isn't to drive down the talent level, it's to make sure that people rise to the occasion and can be part of the draw in terms of volume. There will be people, sadly, regardless of their circumstances, that won't qualify, and they will have to take that difficult decision. But the reality is that we can only accommodate so many, and no promises were made as part of attracting people here to be students or to have postgraduate work permits. It wasn't a constant renewal of postgraduate work permits. It was intended for people to learn a skill set, perhaps take it to another country, perhaps leverage it here, and as a young workforce, contribute to the economy in the way that we want to see things happen. I think what's been lost in a bit of the public discourse is how good Canada has been at making our workforce younger, and that has been driven largely by immigration. The ability of Canada compared to our G7 and our OECD counterparts to have a younger workforce has actually been quite remarkable. And it isn't sort of partisan people that are saying that, it is independent experts, including members of the Bank of Canada. That will position us really well for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and it is exactly what we want to be happening. But that comes with challenges that deal with housing, that come with challenges dealing with inflation, which is not all